This section is on factoring trinomials. Trinomial just means a polynomial with three terms. And the ones that we have will actually be second degree polynomials primarily. If it's not second degree polynomial, it would be a higher degree with a common factor to factor out, and what remains would then be, after factoring the common factor out, what remains would be a second degree polynomial. So in order to see how we might approach this, we look at it backwards. So backwards from factoring is multiplying something out. So if we multiply two binomials of the form x plus d times x plus e, we get x squared plus ex plus dx plus de just by distribution. And then if we group the two x terms together by factoring out the x, or adding the exponents if you want, same thing, you get x squared equals the quantity d plus e times x plus d times e. So if we're trying to get from a trinomial, factoring a trinomial with leading coefficient 1, which is the easiest ones, then we have to do this process backwards, do this computation backwards. We want to start with the x squared plus the quantity d plus ex plus de and end up with x plus d times x plus e. Now, you might notice that all you need to do is you need to figure out what d and e are. So we need to find d and e. Usually the polynomial is given to you in the form x squared plus bx plus c. And from the b and the c, you have to figure out what d and e are. Well, c is the product of d and e, and b is the sum of d and e. And so you can take c and factor it in every possible way. You can factor it as the product of two integers, and then see which two of those integers add up to b. That's the whole idea. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated if the leading coefficient isn't 1, but we want to learn how to do the ones with leading coefficient 1 first. Okay, so we have b equals d plus c plus e, and c equals d times e. So if the trinomial factors with integers, and some trinomials don't factor with integers, so at this point you would just say doesn't factor, meaning doesn't factor with integers. So if the trinomial factors with integers, then d and e are integer factors of c. So we list all ways of factoring c using positive or negative numbers or integers. D and e will be the factors such that d plus e is b. So out of those, so you list all the ways of factoring c, and then pick the pair that adds up to b out of those. So that's how you figure it out. So example 1, factor x squared plus 7x plus 6. Now this is one of the easier ones because 1, the leading coefficient is 1, the coefficient of x squared, and 2, everything is plus. Since everything is plus, my d and e will both have to be positive. Okay, so de is 6, and that can be written as 1 times 6 or 2 times 3. Now I put in the negative ones, even though I just said I don't need them, because maybe you don't realize that you don't need them. It doesn't hurt. You see, when you add, and then I'm going to want to add them to get 7. Well, if you add the negative ones, of course, you get negative numbers. So that's why we don't need those ones. D plus E is 7, so we need the 1 times 6, not the 2 times 3 or the negative times negative ones. So we need 1 times 6. So that means that D is 1 and E is 6, so it factors this way. X plus 1 times x plus 6. So factored means it's written as a product. So on the left side of this is a sum of 3 terms. On the right, it's a single term with 2 factors. Okay, and you check this by multiplying it out. Always, always, always check it, because then you'll never get them wrong. Okay, so x times x is x squared. The constants, 1 times 6 is 6. And then the middle term is the inside and the outside, right? The 2 different ways of getting an x term. So it's 6x plus 1x is 7x. So it's correct. Put a box around it and then enter it on the computer. Example 2, factor x squared minus x minus 6. So this has negatives in it. It still has that last term as a, well, it's like 6, it's negative 6. Now, if the product of d and e is negative 6, then either d or e has to be negative, right? So now the ones with negatives here will count. So these are the different ways of factoring negative 6 in terms of integers. Negative 1 times 6, 1 times negative 6, negative 2 times 3, and 2 times negative 3. Now I want the sum to equal the middle, the coefficient of the middle term, which is negative 1. So it looks like I'm going to need these two. 2 plus negative 3 is negative 1. Right? So the sum of d and e has to be negative 1. So it's got to be this one. So I'll get x plus 2, the quantity, times the quantity x minus 3. It's that simple. Okay. And then you check by multiplying it out. So I'm going to check it here. So, and usually you can check it in your head. If the numbers get more complicated, you can jot down the numbers to make sure that you're doing the numbers right. X times x is x squared. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. And then the middle term, negative 3x plus 2x is negative x. So that checks out. So I put a box around it and then enter it on the computer.